When Street Fighter II showed up in the arcades in 1991, it redefined what most of us thought about the one-on-one fighting game genre. We had been exposed to games like Karate Champ, Yar Kung Fu, and the original Street Fighter years before, but nothing played quite like Capcom's new take on the genre. With Street Fighter II's meteoric rise came countless new competitors to challenge its throne. One of those games was 1992's Mortal Kombat, an ultra-violent take on the formula that allowed you to murder your opponent in some pretty gruesome ways. It featured digitized visuals and sound effects, lending that violence a particularly authentic feel, and it too set the arcade ablaze with newfound interest. But like Street Fighter II, Mortal Kombat wasn't the first game to attempt many of its defining traits. In 1990, Atari Games released Pit Fighter, a fighting game that also employed digitized assets to appear more realistic than the games before it. It was developed for the G1 hardware, an Atari board that specialized in scaling graphics. If you've seen the arcade game Hydra from Atari, it was another game that used its technology. In Pit Fighter, the G1 allowed the massive fighters and playfield to pan, zoom, and scale as the battle unfolds. It was a looker for a 1990 release and blew away anything we had at home. Of course, it had to see a home port, and an absolute slew of them began to show up in 1991. Among those was one for the Sega Genesis, developed by Sterling Silver Software, the same company that had ported Atari's hard driving to Sega's 16-bit powerhouse. In this episode, we are going to take a look at it, see how it turned out, and if it's worth your time today. I hope you guys enjoy my review of Pit Fighter for the Sega Genesis. The story of this one is straightforward and all about the money and recognition of underground prize fighting. You'll be rewarded for crushing the competition, a 10-round free-for-all with no rules, ending with a chance to defeat the champion, the Masked Warrior. The gameplay in Pit Fighter is sort of a hybrid between a traditional fighting game and a beat-em-up. These matches aren't always one-on-one, and you do battle in an arena that allows both left to right and forward to back movement. Unfortunately, the cool zooming and scaling seen in the arcade is completely absent in the Genesis home conversion, so the fighters are the same size no matter where they are in the playfield. You get 3 fighters to choose from, each with their own style and special attacks. Buzz is a powerful wrestler, Tai is a skilled kickboxer, and Kato is a lightning-fast karate expert. Regardless of who you choose, the moves range from simple punches and kicks to much more effective special attacks. Buzz has a body slam, headbutt, and pile driver. Tai has a double kick, spin kick, and roundhouse. Kato has a dragon punch, flip kick, and backhand. The A button is your dedicated punch, B button is your kick, and C is used to jump. Those great special attacks I mentioned are pulled off with A, B, and C together. Because of the nature of the arena-based combat, you need to press certain button combinations to do things like jump kick and duck, something that does take a bit of getting used to. Defensively, all 3 fighters have a block and an evade, which helps immensely when battling multiple opponents. Your skills are not the only weapons available to you. Some stages will have throwing stars, sticks, kegs, bar stools, barrels, knives, crates, garbage cans, and even bikes to help you beat down your foes. Should you find a P in the playfield, that's a power pill, a drug that gives you increased damage and defense for a short time. Be careful, your opponent can pick up those pills as well. Though there are only 3 playable fighters, there are many more competitors you'll need to deal with, each with their own personalities and traits. The same goes for the environments, a mixture of warehouses, garages, and bars full of spectators that want to hurt you as badly as your competitors. The display at the top of the screen shows your life bar, the enemy's name and life bar below that, and information like time and number of KOs you have, the money you've made, and lives you have left, which are represented by hearts. Pit Fighter in the arcade supported 3 simultaneous players, but the Genesis edition supports only 2. Should you fall in combat, you can continue a few times and even switch your character. Finally, there is a hidden options menu in place by pressing A, B, C together at the title screen. I mentioned earlier that the arcade version of Pit Fighter was a fairly impressive game visually at its release, but making its way to the Genesis came with numerous concessions that nullified much of that appeal. The color is pared back heavily, the sprites are tiny, the environments are simplified, and the zooming and scaling is completely gone. The Genesis version shipped on an 8 megabit cartridge, which had no hope at all of replicating the arcade, which was 3 times that size. This leaves us with an experience that is well below expectations graphically. Even the animation sees a crazy amount of simplification, with most moves, even the specials, having little more than a handful of frames. The crowd and the environment get the worst of it, however. A baby's diaper has more color in it than these arenas, and the colorless crowd looks just awful. In the arcade, the crowds would animate and zoom to look as if they were in the shadows, but here, they just come off as sloppy and lacking life. There are some ugly games on the Sega Genesis to be sure, and I count this one among one of the worst. Every aspect of its graphics is unappealing, off-putting, and a gross misrepresentation of the source material. This port needed to wait a few years when cartridge sizes could accommodate a decent attempt. But as it is, it just doesn't cut it. This visual turd isn't much better than most of the games from the 8-bit generation, and the Genesis could have done it so much better. Like the graphics, the sound and music in Genesis Pit Fighter is a mess. It's got a fair amount of digitized sound effects, but they don't sound good, and the music is funky as hell. I'll spare you the torture and make the example relatively short. So far, we know that Genesis Pit Fighter fails on the sound and graphics front, so the question remains, does the gameplay suffer as well? Well, that greatly depends on what you're looking for. If you are comparing this to something like Street Fighter 2, it's pure trash. The action is jittery and the strategies to win are often little more than spamming the same 2 or 3 moves until your opponent is worn down for the finish. It has hit detection issues you have to get used to, pacing problems that will make die-hard fighting fans pull their hair out, and the early difficulty is often unfair and merciless on newcomers. By all accounts, I should tell you to avoid this travesty and never look at it again. But there is something here, something I can't quite put my finger on that is actually, I dare say, fun. Despite its crappy presentation and gameplay, there is an appeal in going against the odds and beating down these bloodthirsty killers. So intent on seeing you die, even the crowd will sometimes attack you, so you get damage coming from every angle. Though the gameplay is rather suspect, the core mechanics can be mastered, and I've seen people wreck this game start to finish without a single loss. You also can't forget the multiplayer, where it's a blast to just mash buttons with a friend and see where the match takes you. So really, I am of 2 minds about old Pit Fighter here. Serious fighting game fans will no doubt play it for 30 seconds, turn their nose up at it, and move on to greener pastures. But casual fans and those not spoiled by the Street Fighters and Samurai Showdowns of the world may indeed find something very much worth their time. It also doesn't hurt that most of the home conversions of the day were even worse than the Genesis edition here. On Super Nintendo, not only did it look bad, but the gameplay was irredeemably broken. The 8-bit versions looked and played bad, and the computer ports stunk as well. Though very far from perfect, the Genesis Pit Fighter can be a good time with the right expectations. Appreciate its funk, and you may just come away with a guilty pleasure. Funnily enough, the magazine reviews of Genesis Pit Fighter were a lot higher than you may expect. Despite being hated by a great many in modern retro gaming, publications like GamePro sung its praises as one of the best games of its type. Take a look at the glowing scores that it gave out. They even said the sound and visuals were incredible. Overseas favorites like Computer and Video Games also gave it an extremely favorable score, mentioning none of the critiques I leveled at it here. I have a feeling that will be the case with many of you. Those of you that stuck with it long enough to learn its eccentricities no doubt found that fun factor I mentioned, while the more discerning crowd will regale you with tales of how repulsive it is. In the end, I can tell you this: it's no Street Fighter II or Mortal Kombat, and those looking for great fighting games can keep on moving. But there are far worse fighting games on the Genesis that aren't half as fun, if you can get past the vomit-inducing sound and visuals. It's the kind of software that will be eternally argued on the internet, with both camps passionately claiming the other has no idea what a good game actually entails. That's what the 16-bit generation is in a nutshell, really. There was such a fantastic spread of software, and each and every piece of hardware gave them their own look and feel. Pit Fighter has what it takes to make you laugh or cry. Give it a shot and see where you land with it. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.